Welcome everybody to our live stream for August. So if this is your first time joining us, I just get flooded with so many questions that I'm just not able to answer them all. And so this is my way of making sure I can get as many questions as possible answered. So if you have questions, just type them in the chat there and I'll address them. First question we got, and if I don't have anybody in the chat here, then I have some saved up questions that we'll get to. But first question from Field. I'm having some weird. Are you guys hearing my audio okay? Oh, here we go. I know what the problem was. I had my live stream open up in two tabs, so I was hearing an echo here. So sorry about that. Okay, so you guys are hearing me all right. All right, good. So Field to Flow asks, do you like wrap bones? Yes, absolutely, I do. They have the wrap bones in 90A and 85A, and I prefer the harder ones in 90A. But I have tried both, and I'm a big fan of them. In fact, I would say that my 62 millimeter Park and Bowl wheels, they, out of everything that I've tried, they most closely compare with wrap bones, I would say. So that's a really great feel for me. Patrick from Germany asks, I have a question about the Long Island McFarlane 34-inch Surfskate. Can you tell me if this one is any good for Surfskate beginners? I ride longboards for years now. I'm 6'1", tall. I weigh around 190 pounds. I could get it for a good price, around $150. I don't know if it's worth it. So, Patrick, my take on Long Island Surfskates is, I mean, you're asking me specifically if it would be good for beginners, and honestly, I lean towards saying no. And it's not because you won't be able to ride it and you won't be able to learn it. It's because, one, it has a very particular feel. So it's not like super universal. Two is the so the way it runs is it runs proprietary half moons shaped bushings in it. And there's no replacements for those. So you can't upgrade them. You can't get aftermarket bushings for them. So it's a unique system. And my biggest complaint about it, or personal preference I don't like about it, is that it's like riding a bike in first gear. It just doesn't have very much forward momentum. And that to me is what limits it. I'm always pretty much across the board going to say Carver CX for a beginner. I think it's just the most universal and least maintenance and just like the best entry point into surf skating, if you're asking me, for somebody who doesn't know anything about it. So that's my take. I just feel like you're going to get more versatility out of a Carver CX or even a YOW than you will the Long Island. Even though they're similar designs, the YOW generates a lot more forward momentum than that Long Island does. Field to Flow, let's see. Rui asked, do you find drop-in essential for bull riding evolving? I don't, because I'm just so chill out there, Rui. Like, I'm not doing anything crazy. So it would be nice to be able to drop in. Because the thing is, where I live, there's 2 skate parks, and both of them have roll-ins. You don't have to drop in. So I imagine that if I were living in an area where I had access to a lot of bowls that required drop-in, that I'd probably be more motivated. But personally, I'm not super motivated to do that. I started learning last year, and I was doing it consistently, and I was filming a video for it. And then I don't remember what happened. Life got in the way, and I just got out of the habit, and I've never picked it up since. But that's my long answer to that short question. Field of Flow also asked, will you link up with Raska CS? So I'm not sure what you mean by linking up. I know CS very well. He's actually one of my team riders. Although that doesn't really mean anything, to be honest. The whole team rider model, that's how I originally started. But my team riders will tell you now that really what I'm looking for is not really team riders, but content contributors. So, if I were a surfskate company like a Carver or a YOW, where I was selling completes, then a team rider, the team rider model makes sense. But in my model, the whole reason I brought them on was so that I could have people to turn to make videos that, just to be able to do things that I can't do on them to help me with the reviews. And so when I'm able to, I'm able to go down to Southern California and film my guys down there. CS lives up in San Francisco, and I just haven't had the time or the bandwidth to be able to make it to San Francisco to film him. But I'm very familiar with CS. He's a very good dude and one of the best surf skaters in the world, if you're asking me. Classical with George asks, when it comes to longboards, is there a reason why you prefer the longer 55-inch boards instead of the shorter 40-inch boards? So many reasons. I just love them. When you get over, and for me, it's like, I would say minimum of 48 inches. But you can just I just love the cross stepping. I love that I don't know, it's just a really unique and fun and intrinsically interesting thing to me that I can go through my whole college campus ride and I can do the same thing on a 57-inch deck as I can on a 32-inch deck. It's just pretty wild to me. With the ability to walk up and down it the whole time, it's just a unique sensation. It's just addictive, at least for me. It's just a whole different thing. You get to the longer boards over 50 inches, and it's just a completely different thing than you've ever been used to. And there's shorter guys who can easily cross step the shorter boards, like the Carver Tyler 777, which is 36.5, and the Continental, which is 37. Those are considered longboards in the typical surf skate scene, right? But for me, I guess I might be able to cross step a 777 a little bit. I'm 6'2", and so if you're shorter, you can do the cross stepping on these shorter decks. But for me, to really do cross stepping, it's got to be a lot longer than these decks. So I love the feel of them. I love the flex of them, the bounce of them when you're pumping them, and I love the cross stepping on them, and I just love the maneuverability of them. It's just so cool to me to be able to ride something that long and beastly and be able to have so much maneuverability on it and pumpability and not have to push my feet ever. So it's fun stuff. Okay, so I asked or answered Patrick's about the Long Islands. And if you're just joining us, ask me your questions in the chat here. Sean asks, I want to put Surfskate trucks and wheels on a 60-inch deck with lots of flex. What do you suggest? I'm interested in the Waterborne setup too. Well, I'm glad you say that you're interested in the Waterborne setup, because I suggest the Waterborne. For me, I've tried, I'm not going to say everything there is to try, but I've tried a lot of different stuff on these longboards. And for me, I've come down to, I prefer the Waterborne on them over anything else. Not just because I like the front rail adapter, but also because I love not just because I prefer the surf adapter, but also because the rail adapter on the rear is absolutely indispensable for these longboards. If you heard me talk about these longboards, you've heard me say that they can actually get pretty squirrely on you. The back wheels on you can be pretty slidey, actually, because you're pushing down in the middle, which kind of pushes your wheels up. So the rail adapter for me is absolutely indispensable for the longboards for keeping those back wheels on the ground. And so for me, if you're dealing with the deck over 50 inches, me personally, I'm going to go with a Waterborne. And depending on the size and the shape and the weight of the deck, I prefer the Waterborne with TKPs usually. But if I'm dealing with these really massive boats, like I have a Hamboards that's 6'6", however many inches that is, it's like 74 inches or something like that. And it's 15 inches wide, and the thing weighs probably 30 pounds. And so for that, I use a Waterborne Dream on it with RKP. So if it's really big, massive boats, I prefer the RKPs. But if you're talking like the 54 to 57 inch range, maybe even up to the 60-inch range, then I prefer TKPs on that. Okay, Rui asks, can you describe the difference from your 93A and the Dragons? I can't, because I've never actually tried the Dragon formulas. Sorry, I take that back. I did try a set of the 64 millimeters, and I didn't like them at all. They were just so slidey. All of the Park and Bowl wheels, not all of them, but most of them that I've tried, I don't really like them on Surfskates. There's a reason why I developed my Park and Bowl wheel. It was kind of a selfish thing. I designed the wheel that I wanted because I was trying a bunch of Park and Bowl wheels, and I just don't like how so many of them are. When you pump on a surf skate, you have your back wheels are pushing laterally side to side, and on so many of the ones that I was trying, when I would pump, I would slide out on the side, which is just a very uncomfortable feeling. And so I wanted wheels that would give you all of the aspects of a Park and Bowl wheel that you want. You want the speed, the hardness, but without losing grip. And so my formula, I can tell you that my formula is way much more grippy comparatively to the Dragon formula, for better, for worse. That's just going to be a personal preference thing. A lot of people, you hear a lot about the Dragons. A lot of people like those for the very reasons that I don't like them, which is the slidiness of them. But that is going to be the main difference, is slidiness. Dragon formula is going to be very slidey, and my formula is very grippy, even at 93A, which is fairly high durometer. All right. Roland asks, how can you go fakie on a surf skate? In other words, does it make sense to practice going fakie, or are surf skates simply not made for this? So, Roland, I am so not the guy to ask this, because it's all I can do to roll forward on a surf skate, let alone backwards. I think that anybody who can do it will tell you that, yeah, it's possible, but no, surf skates are just not meant for this. When you're doing it on a skateboard, you have equally stable front and rear trucks. And on a surf skate, when you've got a more stable rear with a very squirrely front, that's just a whole different experience. So, yeah, I've seen guys ride fakie on surf skates, but only if it's like for a short time, just like within flow of their maneuvers or something. So I don't know exactly what you mean, how long you're wanting to go fakie, but yeah, not the guy to ask, but I think anybody who could would say that. Yeah, it's possible, but not the best for it. Classical with George asks, have you ever used the longboard surf skate on a pump track or in a bowl? No, I haven't because, I mean, first of all, the longboards I'm on, it would be us absolutely impossible unless you're on really mellow stuff. But if it has any kind of sharp curve to it at all, you're going to just bottom out. The wheelbase is way too wide. So my bowls in my town aren't really conducive to it. I can envision, mellow stuff that might, but I'd have to go like I'm riding. Typically, my favorite one is a 57-inch long. I don't think you could go longer than. I mean, listen, it's possible. Of course, anybody can do it, but like you're so limited going through transitions on these longboards. I would think, maybe 40 inches tops would be pushing it. Although there was a guy, Harsha Ripper. I don't know. He disappeared. He was a guy in Switzerland that he would ride a YOW Malibu in a bowl, which does anybody remember how long the YOW Malibu is? I want to say it's like 43 inches. And he was amazing on that thing. But anyway, that's my long answer to that question. And if you watch, George, my recap of the Surfskate Fest in April on my channel, you'll see a guy riding a longboard. Well, actually, you'll see a couple guys riding longboards on the pump track. And on one of them, it's one of my longboards. And you'll see how it's bottoming out over those berms. And so he was actually having to kind of jump up over those berms to time it to even make it. All right. So yeah, the wheelbase makes it a challenge through transitions is the short answer to that question. Rui asks, on the C5, what is the maximum wheel size before it wheel bites? Would your 93A need a lifter? No, you could definitely ride my 93A wheels are 62 millimeters. And they, like the Surf Rider, comes with 65 millimeter wheels, although the hanger is chopped down, it's narrower, which means you can go a little bit bigger without the wider your hanger, the more prone you are to wheel bite. And if you have a narrower hanger, then it's going to be less prone to wheel bite. So on the Surf Rider, I think they can get away with bigger wheels because of the narrow hangers. But no, I don't think you would need extra risers at all with my 62 millimeters on the C5. I honestly don't really know the answer to that question without testing it. I've never really tested it out specifically with the C5, how big of wheels you could go. But I would honestly think that you could probably get away with 65 millimeter wheels on the C5 without wheel bite on what are their stock risers, which I think is what, a 1/4 inch, right? Somebody asks, what is the lightest Surfskate truck? Also the lightest deck? Well, you can't compare decks because they're all going to be different sizes. But Surfskate decks across the board are pretty much all the same construction. You're pretty much talking 7-ply maple. So everything's going to be pretty much the same weight comparatively. Sole boardies are pretty light because they use 5 layers of birch in the middle of them. The Carver Ghost Net is interesting because when me and David, my team rider, brought it out, we were initially thinking it felt lighter, but then he actually weighed it and it was actually more than some of his wooden decks. So I have no idea how to answer the question, what are the lightest decks, because that just depends on the size. But lightest Surfskate truck. One of the videos I am planning in the future is I'm going to compare the top 14 Surfskate trucks on 16 different variables, and weight is included in there. And I'm just racking my brain trying to remember. I don't know what exactly is the lightest. I know the CX is up there. I know the Curve board is up there in terms of lightness. Slide is up there. Your heavier ones are going to be the Waterborne Surf Adapter, the Spice Skate, the YOW. So I can't say that the CX is the absolute lightest, but I would say it's in the top 3 for sure, probably even the top 2. I can't remember. I want to say Curve board might be lighter, but I don't remember. Surfskate cruising. Have you ever tried waterborne on a longboard with reverse kingpin on the back truck and traditional kingpin on the front? That is interesting. I've never had that idea, and that might be worth a shot. You would have to put, I imagine you put a little riser on the front, right? Because RKPs are taller. But yeah, if you put a little riser on the front to even out the height, that's not a bad idea. I'll have to try that out. Rui asks, is there research to build a Surfskate wheel that you can ride when it rains? Well, first of all, if you're riding in the rain, you're probably going to ruin your bearings. So I personally don't like to do that. And unless you're going to ride in the rain and then take your bearings apart and dry them out, which I wouldn't want to do that. So just for that reason alone, that doesn't interest me. Secondly, there are wheels that have been made for riding in the rain. In fact, I think Orangutan, I thought I saw some on their site the other day. Yeah, rain wheels. If you go to orangutanwheels.com, they have rain wheels. They're 80 millimeter Kegels and 85 millimeter Kaguamas for $90, and they just cut channels in them. And I know my buddy Gavin has custom. He takes wheels to a guy who custom cuts channels out of them. So look for Google Harprang wheels, I think is the word for it. Harprang. So yeah, you definitely can find wheels that you can ride when it rains. I have no interest in that, but and I've never tried them, so I have no idea how well they actually even work. But I'd be surprised if they'd work for surf skating. My guess is that the guys who are into them are LDP guys who are just going forever, long distance pumping, and they don't want to stop, even if it rains. But they're mostly, I mean, when you do LDP, you are doing a little bit of lateral pumping, but I can't imagine it working with surf skates with trying to carve, because even if you have those channels and those grooves in it, you're still going to slide out off to the sides. So I don't know, Rui, give them a shot, grab some, and let us know how that goes. Okay, we got the Fakey. Did I already ask? Yes, I asked the Patrick question. All right, I think that was all of the questions I had in my inbox here. George asks, how do you think the CX Trucks compares to the C7 when using a longboard? I would say I prefer, I don't know, one is more stable than the other, is the short answer to that question. I think I probably prefer the C7 for the longboards, but I honestly don't use either the CX or the C7 much for any of my longboards, simply because the rail adapter on the rear. and I could obviously put a rail adapter on the rear with the C7 or CX on the front, but I just haven't gotten to that. But so yeah, it's just the CX is going to be more stable than the same principles are going to apply as on a shorter deck with the CX versus the C7. But for me, the biggest factor in the whole setup is the rear truck, not on the longboards, not the front truck. I can go either way, CX or C7, and they're both great, especially when you can change out the bushings on the CX. Like on these longboards, you really want to have a loose front truck, which is why the Waterborne works really well. It's loose and it's got a really wide range of motion. So if you use the CX on the longboards, what I've discovered is that you want to put 85A bushings on the front, which at my weight at about 195, I would never use 85A bushings on a shorter deck. But when you put maybe 90As on the rear and 85s on the front with a longboard, that makes that front a lot flowier for the longboards, makes it a lot easier to pump. Which you didn't ask, but that's my answer. Okay. Now I'm getting to comments on my channel here. Somebody asked, so you cannot pump a longboard riding without pushing like Surfskates. That's not necessarily true. You can configure longboards to make them pumpable. You can use wedges. Well, I mean, even without wedges, you can pump longboards if you really loosen up the trucks. But it's just not even in the same category as Surfskate. So yeah, absolutely, it's way easier to pump on a Surfskate than a longboard, but it's not impossible to pump on a longboard. Rui asks, let's see. I didn't see, sorry, I'm having a hard time reading your question, Rui, but I think what you're asking is you're not seeing Surfskate Love t-shirts on the site. There are t-shirts on the site. So I'm not sure. If you go to the merchandise section on the shop, you'll see t-shirts. Life B asks, what do you think about grasp and synergy? So I've talked about grasp in some of my other live sessions before, but my bottom line take on the grasp is it's essentially the same thing as the CX. The only difference is that it has less of an angle. The CX is angled more down this way, and the grasp sits up more this way. And as a result, it means that the grasp has more turn, less lean, and the CX has less turn, more lean. And also, the grasp has less forward momentum than the CX. So for me, the grasp is like that Long Island. What do they call it? I can't remember the name of the Long Island truck, but you guys know what I'm talking about. It's like riding a bicycle in first gear, right? And so it's all just personal preference. And I know there's a lot of people out there who are getting into grasp and prefer grasp over CX. For me, I still prefer the CX over the grasp. And it really comes down to one reason, and that's the forward momentum. And another interesting thing to note about the grasp is because of that angle, the grasp truck does not work well on wide wheelbases at all. You hit a certain point, and I haven't been scientific about it, where I've put them on increasingly longer decks to see what that point is. But you hit a certain point on wheelbases with the grasp where all of a sudden that angle just doesn't work. They just do not pump hardly at all when you get them on these longboards, whereas the CX still works great on the longboards. So that was just an interesting thing to me. That's my take on grasp versus CX. All of the differences that you see on them visually are just cosmetic differences, but it's the exact same mechanics of a CX. just with a different angle. Tucker wants to know update on your custom-made longboard deck. So Tucker, I'm glad you asked. I just pulled my first. So if you weren't here last month, I just bought a longboard press that has the ability to make longboards as long as 87 inches long. So it's just over 7 feet. And I just pressed my first one actually yesterday, and I pulled it out. And Tucker, I got to be honest, it was pretty demoralizing because I'm trying to copy these Sector 9 loop nose walkers. And the loop nose walkers they're 57 inches long, and as near as I can tell, they're 12 ply. And we had, when I was working on my prototype with Waterborne with Madrid in Huntington Beach, we had my prototype dialed down to 10 ply. And I don't know what the makeup of HLAM and VLAM was on that. But we had it down to 10 ply. But anyway, the reason why it's demoralizing, Tucker, is because I pressed it at 10 ply, copying what we had on my prototype. And the damn thing is the loop nose walkers are 12 ply and weigh 9.3 pounds. And I haven't cut mine yet, but there's really not that much wasted space around the outside of it. So it's going to be comparable in weight. Mine's 12 pounds at 10 ply. So I have no idea what to do with that information. Like, I don't know if I'm using, I think they might be using birch, whereas I'm using maple, but I can't imagine that explains 3 pounds. So I'm trying to figure out how the heck Sector 9 is making these at 57 inches, 12 ply, and they're 3 pounds lighter than my 56-inch 10 plies. So I'm kind of at a loss, Tucker, and I don't have the slightest clue what I'm doing. So I'm gonna try to, my next one, and the flex doesn't work at all on this 10 ply. It's just way too flexy. So I'm back to the drawing board. I'm going to be wasting a lot of material here, Tucker, on these first batches. And I guess I can probably salvage them by just, if I can probably cut that one down to a certain size, a smaller size, and the flex will work. But there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to learn. And I don't have any real resources. I don't really have anybody I can talk to, there's some people know a little bit, but this is just a whole new level of stuff that I'm trying to figure out here. So, but that is my next frontier. I'm really excited about making longboard decks. I really would like to see if I can't make a series of. I'd love to make a 48 incher. That to me is too short, but I think it would be a good size to get people sold on these longboards who might think that over 50 is kind of crazy, but I think 48 inches might be a good size for one. And then, all the way up to, well, gosh, I'd love to try something 8 or 9 feet even, but the longest I could make would be about 7 feet. But, Rui asks, what's your take riding the C5 in the bowl if you compare the CX? It's more stable. And if you come from a skateboarding background, you might even prefer it over the CX. For me, excuse me, I'm burping here. I imagine that if I were to ride the C5 a lot more in the bowl, that I would get used to it and it'd feel like my go-to. But for me as a surf skater, I never wanted to go in the direction of less range of motion. I wanted to figure out how to make it work at what I was riding. So I just haven't had any, I don't know. It's kind of interesting. Maybe I'm wrong on this, but it feels to me like you're people who have come from more stable trucks, like skateboard trucks. It's more fun going from that to looser surfskate trucks as opposed to going from looser surfskate trucks to more stable trucks like longboard and skateboard trucks. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but at least that's my take. So yeah, the short answer really is it's more stable. The C5 is more stable, less range of motion, and also the hanger is narrower, which makes it more probably more nimble, I would say. Um, but it's just a different feel. Um, Somebody asked, how do you like the Waterborne Dream versus the fin adapter system? And I'm not quite sure what that means because the Waterborne Dream does have the fin on it. So it's not really accurate to compare the Waterborne Dream with a fin unless you're clarifying that you're saying a fin with TKPs. But a Waterborne Dream, the new Dream does have the fin system in it as well. It's just an RKP, not a TKP. What do you think of the YOW Medina? I haven't ridden it, but I've seen it, and it's really great concave. It's a 17-inch wheelbase, for me on a YOW doesn't work, but I think the concave is fantastic on the Medina. Really great for high performance riding. Somebody asked on my Waterborne surf adapter video if these adjustments work with the penny highline. Yes, of course they do. It's interesting. The penny highline, it uses the Waterborne surf adapter, but my understanding is, not that anybody gives a crap about this, but Penny doesn't actually buy them from Waterborne. They manufacture their own, is my understanding. Waterborne just licenses the design to them. But at the end of the day, it's all the same design, so you can absolutely do those adjustments. Somebody asked, can I buy the Waterborne adapters trucks and put them on my 33-inch long times 10-inch wide Pool King deck? Yes, absolutely, for sure. The only consideration, caveat would be, I don't know what the wheelbase is, and the wheelbase is very critical. So if your wheelbase is too narrow for your stance width, then it wouldn't work. But assuming that your wheelbase works for your stance width, then it's just fine. I think we might call it a night here, unless anybody else on has any other questions. I'm just scrolling through old comments here. Somebody asked I've gotten a lot of questions about the Globe Surfskate, and I've answered it I think this is probably the fourth time I've answered it in these live sessions. But so yeah, Globe came out with a copycat of the C7, and my bottom line take is I rode it once and it immediately went into the junk pile. I did not like it at all. It has a weird slip out sensation when you go from rail to rail. It's just like a pushes you to the side. It's a really kind of interesting, weird feel. So I didn't like it at all after one ride. I may or may not do a review on it. Some of you may have heard me say this before. I'm to the point where, when I first started, I was just reviewing anything and everything because I was all excited to be here and it was all new for me and it's just fun and sharing the stoke and sharing the knowledge. But I've gotten to a point now where if I don't like it, I probably just won't review it simply because I don't want to hurt companies. I mean, my intention, it's a challenge. There's always kind of a balance I'm trying to strike because my whole original intention for coming here was to try to save consumers time, money, and hassle, because I know that my experience was very frustrating coming here and trying to figure stuff out. I was a total newbie kook. I had no idea what I was doing, and there just wasn't great information out there. And so I came here to be that advocate for the consumer. And I'll admit, when I first came out, I'd say I was a friend to consumers and an enemy to companies, and that had a certain value, I suppose. But as I've kind of figured out more, and I'd prefer to walk that fine line where I'm being an absolute advocate for consumer, but also a friend to companies as well. Because at the end of the day, my intention is just to spread the stoke and to just get as many people into surf skating as possible. So I don't give a crap what anybody rides, as long as you're riding something, right? And so, but if somebody's going to ask me directly, then I'm going to answer honestly. But that's my long answer to the globe. Nate Ross asks, have you tried the crazy longboards on wooden wave banks or in skate parks? So this was similar to a question we got previous, Nate, where somebody was asking me if I've ridden them in bowls and pump tracks, and my answer was just that the challenge with riding transitions on the longboards is the wheelbase. So if the transition is just too steep or too much, then you're just going to bottom out. You're going to just high ground on it, right? But if it's mellow enough, there's a guy, Nate, and I don't know if you're talking about the same guy I am, but there's a guy in Japan who I follow on Instagram, and I just love his style. And he rides a long YOW, like one of their longest models. And he's in kind of these mellow wave banks, and he does cross-stepping in flow as he's coming up and down them, which is really beautiful for me to watch. So I really love watching that. So I imagine if you were, like I said earlier, for me personally, I can't imagine getting away with longer than 40 inches or so. And even that, you have to have just the right bowl and wave bank for it. But yeah, those wide wheelbases make transitions hard. Okay. If there's no other questions, well, I'll just get a few more here. Any thoughts on Carver Tritons in the bowl? Bottom line take is they would work. They probably wouldn't be ideal. The Triton decks just don't have a lot of concave. It's more of a mellow concave, but they definitely will work. Like, if you were a beginner and you're a beginner on a budget and you buy a Triton to start with, and you're progressing and then you want to learn bull riding, but you don't have much of a budget, then I would most definitely say stay on that Triton, upgrade the wheels, get harder, smaller wheels, but stay on the Triton. But if you have a budget and you want to play around and you want to be serious about bull riding, then I might recommend something with a little bit more concave than the Triton. Somebody asks, I'm just 5'4". I'm wondering if a 32-inch board is too big. I'm adult. I've got the Carver Hobo 32.5-inch C7. Listen, at the end of the day, it's all just personal preference. For me, when it comes to surf skates, there's no such thing as too big. There is only such thing as too small, right? There's only such thing as having too narrow of a wheelbase for your stance width, in which case it's unrideable because you're weighted over that front truck and you're just going to be jackknifing. But once you get to an acceptable length for your stance width, then the sky's the limit. There's nothing too long. It's all just personal preference. It's all just what ride are you looking for. So, if you're going to ask that question, you have to ask, well, too long for what? Too long for feel, too long for preference, too long for bull riding. What is it you're trying to do? What's the application? What's the feel that you're looking for? But I've said this before, and I should do a better job of clarifying this, because when I made my Surfskate selector, it was all exciting for me to have I was just working with so many different trucks and trying to find a system that would work. At the end of the day, all I was trying to do was help somebody like me who had never bought a surf skate before ever, and you're trying to do it online, and you don't want to make mistakes, because I was trying a bunch. Like I bought a Swell Tech and was like, holy crap, I had no idea these were so crazy. I never would have bought a Swell Tech had I known they were like that. So, I got all excited about discovering this formula that is rooted in the wheelbase of the thing, and how the different Surfskate trucks have different wheelbase offsets. But I think I probably, gave too strong of a message around the Surfskate selector. At the end of the day, it's not like some rigid thing. It's not like saying whatever answers it spits out is like the holy grail for you. You can ride 1,000,001 different Surfskates, and you'll just come to learn to like it, or learn to ride it for different reasons or whatever, different feels. But all the Surfskate selector is intended to do is to help somebody buy their first one and really just make sure that they don't get too narrow of a stance width. But the sky's the limit. There's really no such thing as the perfect Surfskate. There's just different feels. I'm not a surfer, but I think any surfer will tell you that, they all ride different boards for different reasons, different terrains, different feels. And it's no different out here. And so, if you're really going to be serious about surfskating is it's very unique compared to skateboarding, because with skateboarding, there's not a whole lot of variation out there. Like, yeah, you get variation in deck sizes and shapes ish, but really in skateboarding, everything's a lot more uniform. But with surf skating, there's, the Smooth Star thruster feels so much different than the Carver CX. There's just an infinite number of setups that you can do that will all feel different. And so if you're going to be serious about surf skating, for me, half the fun of it is the experimenting on different setups, right? So, get your first one and make sure that the stance width isn't too narrow. But after that, sky's the limit. There's no such thing as too big. There's just, what do you like? Just what do you like? And there's only one way to find that out, and that's from a lot of experimentation. So I'm not seeing any other questions here. So I think we'll call it a night, unless there's any other final questions here. But thanks everybody for attending. Good to see you all. Appreciate you all. And we will do this again. We're doing this the first Sunday of every month. So next one will be Sunday, September 1st. Oh, in fact, me and David, my team writer, talked about him actually doing the one in September. So I haven't heard yet from him if was able to get that off of work. But with any luck, you'll be seeing David September 1st, not me. So, all right. Thanks, everybody. We will see you next month.